I am enamored by the PS1. No, not that PS1. Because that's not even the PS1. That's just the PlayStation. The PS1, which is spelled out O-N-E. That one, the PlayStation wasn't really called the PS number 1 until in retrospect. Some people also call this the PS1, spelled out, the PS1 Slim. But not a ton of people, but some people. Anyway, I'm your cool Uncle Marissa, and I'm enamored with this little guy. I will henceforth be calling the original PlayStation just PlayStation. And I will be calling this one PS1, okay? So the PS1 is adorable. It is notorious for its very expensive LCD screen attachment. Apparently those things were very cheap a long time ago before I was born. No, I'm kidding, but like before I got into modding and way before I got into actually this channel. And apparently modders were like buying them up and mangling them. Those of you in the comments were like, why did you do that to this precious thing? Why did you turn your Game Boy Color into a Game Boy Pocket Color? You'll regret it. Buddy, that's reversible in a move that will perhaps vindicate you. Now those LCD screens are very expensive and a bit hard to find. But that's not what this is about. The PS1 is very adorable. It's very small, and I picked this up a while back for those reasons, honestly, because I do have a PlayStation that has its disk drive, and I have a PlayStation that it has XStation installed, and I have my PS2s. So I do have a number of ways to actually play PlayStation games. I got this, and you know, it works with the RGB SCART cable that the PlayStation works with, plugged it in, beautiful, everything's beautiful. Recently, you may have noticed that this is a little bit different. Where are the stickers? And perhaps it's smaller. If you're in my Discord, you may have heard for a while that I was like, I don't need two 20-inch RGB modded TVs, but I do need two TVs, and I want a smaller one that I can just use to watch things on. And you know, trying to find one on a marketplace or anything like didn't really work out for me until the other day I stepped out of my apartment and there it was. This 13-inch Sony Trinitron, not RGB moddable, which, you know what, probably for the best, so I won't be precious about it, but it has these, I don't know if you can see, you probably can't, but these big holes here, these are speakers. It has these giant speakers and stereo sound, which is crazy considering that there are 20-inch Trinitrons which don't have stereo sound, they just have mono. And it seems like a model that was probably marketed as sort of like having big sound, high sound quality. Anyway, very cute, very happy with it. If you're interested, I might do a little video showing it off. I don't know. I tend to be like, everything has to be educational. But anyway, I was like, how cute would it look with the PS1 on top of it? And I plugged it in, and this is what I saw. Yeah. So no picture really. I was trying to look up what could be the possibilities, and that is kind of the beginning of the beautiful journey of like, oh my God, you type in PS1 with the 1 spelled out and the search engines correct it for you and show you results for PS number 1. But anyway, turns out the capacitors on these guys are not really known for sticking around terribly long. And there are 3 capacitors specifically that are in charge of video. One is for composite out, one's S video, and the other one just goes to the AV out and is marked video on the schematic. I don't know. And those fail or leak over time pretty commonly. Now, why does this not show up with the RGB SCART or even the LCD screen attachment? If you have that, it's because those components are actually inside the SCART cable or the LCD screen by virtue of how RGB signal travels as opposed to composite or S-video. So yeah, I just had no idea. So I figured we could make a whole thing about this. Let's go and change these capacitors together and see if that fixes the problem. The PS1 is very simply put together. It only has these 6 screws on the back. One is hidden under a sticker, but there's not really any screws going on the inside, so I thought this would be extremely simple. But instead, I spent hours on these screws. Apparently, they are fairly notoriously difficult to unscrew. I don't know what they did at the factory. You would think they put super glue in them. They're so hard to remove. So my suggestion is to go ahead initially with the largest Phillips screwdriver that you can use. I went ahead as usual with my screwdriver toolkit, which has, these interchangeable screwdriver heads and has some give on the rotational element, and all it would do is cause the screwdriver to rotate. So in the end, I ended up going with a just home screwdriver that's all 1 bit. And I still had a lot of trouble and ended up having to Dremel one of the screws because by that point it had gotten stripped through my efforts, which is because no one gave me this advice. So this is my advice to you. I had added sewing machine oil, I had added alcohol, thinking there was dirt in there or rust, but no, it's just insane. Once you have wrestled with the Hulk himself, all you do is lift the top, and then you can remove the optical drive by removing the ribbon cable and removing the wires, and just keep it somewhere clean and safe so you don't damage it. Those are not easily replaceable bits. And then you take off the metal shielding, and there you have the PCB, which once you remove, there is another piece of metal shielding underneath. But all in all, this is a very simple assembly that's just been held together by the arms of God. All right, now let's take a look at the board. So these are the 3 capacitors that are in control of the video output. The far left one, C508, goes to the video output jack, and the other 2, C550 and 551, are S-video and composite. And I have found people online saying 50D is composite and others saying 51 is composite, so might as well just change both of them. Now 550 and 551 are 220 oof, that's microfarads, at 4 volts. And the AV output cap is 100 microfarads at 5.3 volts, an awkward number, but you just need to make sure that your replacement capacitor is rated for a voltage of equal or higher to that. It is the oofs that you want to be completely matched. So I'm just going to replace 550 and 551 because I just bought those from DigiKey. I didn't buy the 3rd value because I figured most people seem to have success with just replacing one or both of these. Now, in terms of removing these caps, it's a bit of a chore. It's not as easy as like a through-hole component or even SMD resistors and stuff where they're flat. There could be some ease in using a hot plate or a hot air as long as you made sure that all of the surrounding bits are protected, given that there's a lot of surrounding bits, but there's nothing on the back. I didn't really want to do that because I felt like it would be easier for me just to hand desolder and solder. I have the knife tip on my soldering iron. I think a J tip would probably be quite helpful here, actually. I do have one, I just didn't replace it. And you could just wrap the J around the side and use that. But anyway, what I'm doing is add flux, and if you'd like fresh solder, to the joints of the capacitor, and then apply the heat, and you can hold on with tweezers and don't don't pull the tweezers really hard. You don't want to accidentally rip the pads off or break something or damage something. But you can just use the tweezers to kind of rock a little back and forth, and that way once it's coming off a little bit one side and then a little bit on the other side, it takes time, but I feel like it's the safest way and it's the easiest way for me, at least. Now that they're both off, we can just clean up the solder that is there and clean up all that gunk with a Q-tip and isopropyl alcohol. Once you've cleaned the surface, you can prep for adding the new capacitors. So I'm just going to add some flux, and if you need to, you can add some more solder on top as well. Basically what I'm going to be doing, since I'm using an iron and not a hot plate, is I will be trying to heat up the little pools of solder on each side in order for it to go ahead and make contact with the joints on the SMD cap. And again, those tweezers are very handy for keeping it in place and keeping it level. Otherwise, it's very possible to accidentally have it lifted on one end. Also, make sure that you note the polarity of these caps. You'll notice that there is a colored in part of the capacitor. It's black on the original ones and red on these ones from DigiKey. That side goes towards the 90-degree angle, just flat side of the cutout on the board. And the other side that is silver goes towards the rounded side. These caps are in such tight quarters. It really is quite annoying. Again, where I think a pointier tip might be helpful if you don't have whatever patience I was carrying with me in this situation. All right, so once the recap is done, I went ahead and plugged it in via Composite onto the TV, and I got video. However, there is this rolling bar of static, which I tried to video as best I could. Hopefully you don't think I'm gaslighting you, but I'm following it with my finger. And that is quite interesting. I've never seen something like that before when plugged in with Composite. I don't see it with my original PlayStation. It's just with this guy. So that led me to wonder, maybe that third capacitor needs to be changed as well. I didn't buy that value from DigiKey, so I went ahead and grabbed that, and you won't have to wait like I did. So I changed those SMD caps with the ones from DigiKey that I bought. And I forgot to buy one for the correct value for that third capacitor that goes to the AV out. What I ended up doing is go on Console 5 and just get one of their capacitor kits. People seem to have mixed feelings about Console 5 because ultimately it's can be better value to go on DigiKey or Mouser and buy a ton of stuff as opposed to just buying a small batch of caps from Console 5 for just one project. Unfortunately, the thing is that sometimes you can be stupid and forget to buy the other values that you might need because you think you won't need them or you just forgot or whatever when going to DigiKey or Mouser like I did. Sometimes maybe you don't actually need to buy stuff for other projects. I know it's crazy coming from me, but I genuinely didn't. So I had just paid the same amount of shipping for one type of SMD cap that I would have paid in shipping from Console 5 for the full shebang. So I think if you have very significant feelings about Console 5 or anyone else who's selling cap kits for recapping your consoles, maybe choose peace instead of violence and think of it as a case-by-case issue. But anyway, we waited, we got our Console 5 caps, and so with these three all swapped out, we're still getting the same issue. We have this like weird rolling static bar. And I tried it on my 20-inch Toshiba, and I don't get the rolling static there. So it's like, oh, is it a TV thing? However, I do get a flickering picture. And I don't get any rolling static with anything else, even the PlayStation plugged in by a composite on the little Sony. So I feel like there's just something going on with the PlayStation 1. So I figured, let's swap out all of the caps that are included with the Console 5 kit. Now, when you swap out all of the caps, especially when there's so few, like in this project, it doesn't hurt to test it after you do each one or at least every section, just to make sure that you didn't mess something up. Or, if you change all of it and something's not working, you have to go and diagnose a lot more minutia than you would if you were doing a test step by step. I'm a huge advocate of testing things out step by step. It takes more time, but it takes less time than trying to diagnose something after a massive sweeping change. And a mixture of what one could call compulsion, hope, fun, pick your poison. I'm just gonna recap the rest of the board with the Console 5 capacitors. And there's not really a lot to show here, but one thing to note is you'll notice the Console 5 caps are also black, like the original capacitors. So I would get a paint pen or a Sharpie or something and mark the new caps so that you know what's new and what isn't. I'm using an acrylic paint pen in red to just put a little dot on each one. I think you get the gist, so let's just fast forward to closing this thing back up, which also is not super challenging. all recapped, and that's absolutely beautiful. This will be living a bit of a longer life than I suppose it originally would have. However, still I have that rolling static or the flickering image on the Toshiba. So there is something going on with the video that I don't have an issue with the PlayStation or really any other console over Composite. I can obviously continue to use this over RGB SCART. It looks gorgeous over RGB SCART, but it is bugging me, and I would love to know if any of you have encountered this. This is the only PS1 I have, so I don't have something to compare it to. Is this just a thing with the PS1? I did ask in my Discord, and one of my nerd fuse was like, I've never noticed anything with my PS1 over Composite, so, you know, maybe not, but I am very curious. I'm kind of sad because I know I could probably deal with it, but I don't want to, so it's not going to be going on top of the tiny Sony. You might even see actually that that's just it's just a PS. It's just the PlayStation. That's my X-stationed PlayStation, which probably is better anyway, because the game discs that I have are primarily like JRPGs and stuff, and pretty long stretch kind of games, which I would be playing over RGB SCART anyway. But the aesthetic. Although this wasn't a perfect success, it certainly was a success, as we did go from no picture to picture. And I hope that this was helpful for you if you need to diagnose your lack of picture from your PS1, or a weird picture or degrading picture. And even if you are nervous about SMD caps, I hope this was helpful. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you would like more video game content, you can always join my Ko-fi for just $2 a month. You become a NerdView Advance, and you are able to watch monthly game reviews where I review the game I've played that month. Please like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you, or you're interested in other modding, repair, etc. videos. That is a thing that we do here. Otherwise, I have been your cool Uncle Marissa, and don't forget, you are always welcome at Cool Uncle's house. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.